my spin on a sweet potato pie. So here I am peeling my potatoes that have been cooking in the oven a little under an hour on 450 degrees. And so I like to peel mine while they are piping hot. You can let yours sit a moment if you like, but there's a reason I do this. And I prefer baking them as opposed to boiling out some of the nutrients and the sugar that's in the potato. It seems, in my opinion, that the pie tastes better when you bake it, and you can smell it when it's baking. You don't smell it when it's boiling. So another thing that I do here is I try to make sure I get all the strings. So I will scrape them, as you see here, with the knife to get as many of the strings off as possible, because we don't want any of that in our pie. And once I do that, I just place it in a bowl, and then I just blend it up. And I'm also checking for additional strings. So if I see any real stringy type texture in there, I'll pull it out. And then I just start adding. Now, this is the reason I like to do it while it's hot. I don't have to melt my butter. That's room temperature butter. And in less than 30 seconds, that butter is melted in those hot potatoes. As you can see here, it just disappears. And I tend to blend a lot. I'm sure you can just basically add all the ingredients in, but I like to take it at a slow pace, I guess I could say, because I like to make sure my potatoes are really blended well. But here I'm adding agave, no cane sugar in this recipe. So that's a cup of agave I'm getting blended in. Initially, I start out with 1 cup. And so after I get that blended in very well, I also look for strings. And if I see any strings, I will remove them. And so up next, I just go ahead and add all my seasonings and salt. Get that poured in. And then see the piping hot, steam coming from that. I add 2 tablespoons of flour there. I get every drop in there. And then I blend it up really, really well. I want to make sure, again, I'm checking for any strings. Because, sometimes they float to the bottom and you just miss them. So I want to make sure my pie is well blended. But then I'm adding my oat milk. You can use walnut milk. It is just as delicious. It just gives that extra pop of flavor to the recipe. And so after doing so, I'm going to get my vanilla in here and every drop of that. Good vanilla is the best thing to use. So even vanilla paste is good, but I was out. So I'm using this organic extract, and I'm also using lemon extract, which adds an additional boost of flavor here. So I get that well blended, and then I do my taste test. And at this point, this is when I use a 1/2 cup of agave. Again, no cane sugar in here. And then I get my eggs in. I get my eggs in there. And I scrape my bowl really well because I want every drop of my eggs. And so once that's all in, I blend it up really, really well again. Guys, I like my potatoes well blended. But I also check these here. And if there's any strings, I'll rinse it off. And then I'll blend and rinse off again if necessary. But these potatoes were really good. So then I put it to the side and I work with my crust. This is my homemade crust. You can check my links for the recipe. But it's buttery. It is so delicious. And when you make homemade crust, it's nothing like what you get in the store. So here I'm just getting it rolled out. I try to make a perfect circle. I should have used just a little bit more of my pie crust. I separated it into two, and I should have used a larger amount because I wanted it to come up higher over the sides. This is a deep dish pie, fairly large size. So the information is in the description below. But here I'm just trying to make sure I get a perfect circle, making sure that the dough isn't sticking to the roller there. And I have it on top of wax paper because I find the wax paper helps me to roll it, as you see here. And then I just roll it over my deep dish. And then I try to scoot it in there. I'm still learning to be a pro at this. But as you can see, I wish I would have had more dough. But I'm trying to make it as pretty as possible. But if I had a little more dough, I could have went all the way up because I like extra crust on my pie. So I want to just put it in the oven at 350 for about 7 minutes. I just want it to puff up a little bit. And so that it doesn't puff up too much, I just take a pan and I put some water for weight and just lightly cook it like that. And then I add my filling. And I fill it all the way up. I know some people say, oh, don't fill it all the way to the edge. I fill it all the way. And these two potatoes seem to do the job perfectly. And here is my extra little spin on this recipe, which you may have noticed, and that is pecans. This is also delicious with walnuts, if you want to try that, if you love walnuts. But I'm a pecan fan, I should say. And so I like to sprinkle a lot on top, like so, and then in the oven. And I tend to cook it almost an hour, testing it with a toothpick. And then it was warm, but I had to cut it. It had the whole house smelling like the holidays. And they tell you to wait because they tend to fall apart. But I am doing it here, and look, it didn't fall apart. I was so pleased. Now, the back fell a little bit after sitting there for a minute because it was still hot. Delicious pie. Mm-hmm. Thanks for watching.